everybody, how you doing out there? And welcome back to the Nightmare on Elm Street Ranking the Victims' Death. I'm actually doing two movies in this one video, Freddy's Dead and New Nightmare. Well, with Freddy's Dead, we got 4 deaths, and then with New Nightmare, there's only 2 of them, so we're going to have 6 overall. I would definitely be kind of curious, how would you actually rank all 6 of these? What is your opinion about the kills and the build-up? And for me, my bottom 2 are so-so to bad, but from 4 to 1, I definitely will say I do enjoy at least one or the other. We shall discuss everything in the comment section if you would like to, so let's get ourselves started. Number 6 is going to be Mrs. Krueger from Freddy's Dead. So you got human Freddy Krueger, and we actually hear a scream while he's in the backyard playing with his daughter, and it's actually his wife, and she's coming out from the basement, and Freddy goes up to her, and she starts saying, "I won't say anything." Freddy actually says to his daughter to actually go into the basement, so she goes because he needs to talk to his wife alone. So when she goes down, she looks like she's about to go upstairs. We get like a little bit of a door slowly opening, so she goes in and she sees what the mother actually saw, which was a few of these like Freddy gloves and newspaper clippings of all the dead kids that Freddy has already taken out. So whenever the young lady comes back up, she actually notices that her mother's being choked by her dad. It's just like, eh. Number 5 is going to be Chase from Wes Craven's New Nightmare. I'm just going to tell you right off the bat, this is pretty much just a rip-off. Change some stuff up a little bit of Dan's death from part 5. This one is not as good here. That's why it's as low as it actually is here. But you got Chase, who's actually at a movie theater, or not a movie theater, he's actually on a movie set. And he actually gets a phone call from his wife, Heather Langenkamp, and saying about, look, I'm really worried about our son. Is there a chance you can come home? And he pretty much does that. He gets in his truck, he gets going. It's already nighttime, and he's trying to keep himself up the best way he can because he's yawning a few times throughout the scene here. Turns on the radio for about a minute. That doesn't quite work out. He actually shuts it off. I think he starts like singing a song. He actually opens up the window. And while this is actually going on, we actually get Freddy's glove that comes through the driver's side seat, and it slowly crawls over, and then it actually kind of catches, of course, the outside of the pants here, like almost like touches his dick, and then actually the claw disappears. He goes down and scratches. Then he actually yawns again, and then the claw just comes up really fast and claws Chase in the stomach. He actually goes off the road, he screams, and he actually hits a wall. Again, it's weak. Number 4 is going to be John Doe. So you got John Doe who's actually sleeping in the van. When we get to John Doe's dream, he's actually in his bed. He gets out of bed, he actually opens up the window, and it is like gorgeous out. So he actually ends up going downstairs. I believe he was on the back porch, but all of a sudden we get the house that shoots up in the goddamn space. Then John Doe wakes up again in his bed. And he's like, you know what? I am not going out anywhere. I'm staying right here. Then all of a sudden we get fire around his bed, and he's like, shit or fuck. So he jumps out of bed and he jumps out the window, and he's falling to his death because it turns out the house is still flying up in the air. And then he actually has a tag somewhere around his shoulder. It says like, pull me. So he actually yanks it and he goes up, and it's actually a parachute. Then we actually have Freddy Krueger, who's actually just kind of hanging there on the inside of the parachute, and then he kind of slowly slides on down. John Doe's like, I know why you actually kept me alive. And Freddy's like, oh, you think I'm your daddy? Oh no, I just wanted to get close enough for you to help me get to my daughter. He actually cuts some of the parachute rope. John Doe's falling again, and then you got Freddy already at the bottom, and he's dragging these bed of spikes. And then John Doe hits those spikes, and he's bleeding, you know, from his, pretty much his entire body, and, through the shirt. And I'll say this is a death I used to always like. I still kind of like the Looney Tunes part of it there, but just his death alone is just so-so. Number 3 is going to be Jolie from Wes Craven's New Nightmare. Jolie, who's actually in a hospital room with Heather's son, Dylan. We get these 2 nurses that actually come in. They're kind of whispering to each other, and then they kind of split up. Jolie goes to one of the nurses who's filling up one of the needles with whatever liquid it's going to be, and then she's like, hey, what's going on? The nurse is like, can you please step out of the room? And Jolie's like, no, I'm not going to do that. While the other nurse ends up having another needle, shoots it into Dylan's arm. Then you actually get Jolie, who actually punches one of the nurses and scares the other one. They both actually leave. Jolie locks the door, goes over to Dylan, holds on to him and says, hey, stay awake, pal. Please stay awake. He actually looks over her shoulder and there goes Freddy. He says something. Jolie turns around, doesn't see Freddy, turns back to Dylan. Freddy does this and actually stabs her in the back. Then we're actually in the hallway. And we got a guy with a key who unlocks the door. Him and the two nurses go in and they see that Jolie's up in the air. They actually get scared and run away. Then Freddy actually drops. Jolie goes up to Dylan and say, hey Dylan, you ever play called Skin the Cat? And then he actually grabs one of Jolie's legs, drags her on the wall up to the ceiling. Dylan's actually screaming for her and reaching for her while she's reaching down. Freddy actually just puts his finger on her forehead, turns the head a little bit, and she breaks her neck and then she falls. At least even though if you're going to rip off one of your own movies, I feel like that Tina's was definitely a good choice. Number 2 is going to be Spencer. So you got Spencer sleeping on the couch. He actually wakes himself up. The TV goes on. You get that infomercial with Johnny Depp's cameo there about the whole this is your brain on drugs. Once that actually ends, Spencer ends up actually getting tricked by Freddy and ends up getting stuck in the TV. Then we actually get John Doe, Maggie, and Tracy that come and say, now Spencer is actually gone. So they're kind of all around this abandoned house going everywhere to try to see if they could find Spencer. Well, it actually turns out Spencer went through the TV into a video game and Freddy's playing him in the video game. At one point, you actually got Spencer doing like something like this and he's actually breaking down the wall and then eventually he ends up back in the abandoned house. John Doe is the one that actually ended up finding him. And then we actually have Spencer just laying on the floor. You got the 3 people who are actually up around him there, and his stomach keeps getting looks like he's being kicked in the stomach there, and it turns out cartoon Freddy in the game is kicking him. Eventually, Spencer stands up. I think he actually bounces a couple times on the floor up to the ceiling. He walks out of the room, and just a lot of wacky shit going on. And then we actually have John Doe and Tracy who are actually able to get into the dream world. I believe it was Tracy who saw Freddy first or heard his voice, and they actually run over to almost like this little cubicle that Freddy's actually in. Tracy's actually able to take the game controller off of Freddy, and he's like, hey, you guys forgot the power glove. Then I think the door actually closes, and then we actually got Spencer hopping up the top of the steps here. You got Maggie at the bottom, and he starts kind of doing sort of something like this, like he's about to fall. He eventually does tumble down, and then we get a big hole in the floor that Maggie has to step back. He actually goes down, and then his soul goes into Freddy, which actually makes sense, but I really did like the build-up to that there, and then it just felt like that, him falling into a hole and then the soul thing. I'm just like, And number 1 is going to be Carlos. So you got Carlos, who's also taking a little bit of a nap. He wakes up, he actually hears Tracy's voice, or at least he thinks he actually does. He gets out of bed, gets out of the room. When he walks around the corner, this abandoned house turns into small apartments because you got people walking by. You see women in the kitchen cooking, all the doors actually shut, and then Carlos actually turns around and boom, there's a wall right there, and then you hear her voice and it turns out it's actually his mother. He actually walks over to his mother, she slaps him, and then she turns into Freddy Krueger. He has a pretty decent sized Q-tip, puts it in Carlos's ear, and it goes throughout the other and knocks out his hearing aid. So now Carlos cannot hear. Freddy actually grabs Carlos and then tosses him through a wall. And now Carlos is actually in the boiler room. And then Carlos is looking around, doesn't know what's going on. And you got Freddy right behind him doing stuff like this, like he's calling his name and, waving like this behind him. And Carlos doesn't see him. Then all of a sudden, Carlos looks up and Freddy's on the next story up. And he's actually holding the hearing aid, drops it down. Carlos actually, I think he has to dive and catch it. And then he actually puts the hearing aid pretty much. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention that Freddy did chop off one of his ears where it was the hearing aid. So he actually has to put this hearing aid on the only other ear he has, and then all of a sudden his good ear starts mutating with the other ear that he actually did with the hearing aid, and then he actually hears like little dripping water that really wouldn't bother a lot of people, but it's so freaking loud to him, so he actually has to go over and turn the spigot off, kind of wipe it down so it stopped dripping. And then we actually get Freddy, and he's stretching something out, and it's a chalkboard, using the claw, and starts like clawing the entire chalkboard until Carlos's head blows up. Freddy actually catches the hearing aid and says something like, "Nice hearing from you, Carlos." And to me, I think this was definitely great all the way through. I hope you guys actually did enjoy this, and I will see you guys in the next one. Have yourselves a good one. Bye.